Matt Barrie is the founder and CEO of Freelancer.com, which is ASX listed and worth 400 million. 400 million, is that right? Huge. Matt Barrie lives in Point Piper, Sydney, not a direct neighbour to Malcolm Turnbull, but the former PM is just down the road. Matt Barrie runs the largest startup and growth conference in Australia as well, which is on next week. Extraordinarily, 15 years ago, Mark Zuckerberg was one of the freelancers on Matt Barrie's website. And he, of course, joins me live now. Thank you for coming on the program tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Now, in 1986, Paul Keating famously said that Australia was at risk of becoming a banana republic. You now think that we we're now in that state.
That's right. I mean, Paul said that if Australia's just going to continue to muddle along and sell a bit of wool here and a bit of iron ore there and let the sophisticated industrial side of the economy fall apart, that would end up being a banana republic. Now, if you look at the definition of a banana republic, it says that there's a small country which is politically unstable because there's one dominant export that's primarily controlled by foreign capital. And effectively, the country is there now. We don't have one export, but we have one export partner, which is China. 38% of everything we produce in this country, whether it's dig it out of the ground or make it, goes to China. And China is now in a major trade war with the United States. I mean, effectively, and what do we do in this country? We dig out dirt from the ground, which we ship to China in the form of iron ore, which gets turned into steel to build apartments, many of which are empty, and it's just being used to stimulate GDP growth. We dig fossilised trees or dead trees out of the ground, which we ship to China and Japan in the form of coal, either to produce steel in the case of China, or to burn for electricity in Japan in the wake of Fukushima while they're trying to get their nuclear power plants up and running. And we have immigration dressed up as education, where we educate primarily the Chinese in our universities as a pathway to immigration to the country. Apart from that, we do very little else. And in fact, as a measure of, if you think about those three things right now, well, iron ore is down 30% from its peak. It was only up recently because of the dam failure in Brazil. Coal is very dependent on the price of iron ore and also very dependent on the world's propensity to continue burning it for electricity. I mean, Britain just had its first month of producing electricity since the Industrial Revolution without burning fossil fuels. And the education sector is already turning. The reports came out last week that it's down 3.4% in New South Wales, and some major universities have to put in place hiring freezes and budget cuts. I mean, if you think about how sophisticated our economy is, Harvard runs a measure called the Harvard Complexity Index, which is a measure of how sophisticated the products and services your country produces are and how difficult it is for other countries to replicate that. And Australia ranks 93rd.
Although that study has been slightly discredited, it didn't take into account various measures. But yes, Australia did do very poorly in that study. What do we need to do, though, in your view, to secure our future economically?
Well, there's plenty of things we need to do. We need to elaborately transform the things that we dig out of the ground into higher-end products that we ship overseas, rather than just ship the raw materials. So, for example, in Australia,
some actual manufacturing.
That's right. For example, in Australia, we produce all the materials that you could use to produce lithium batteries, but instead we just ship the raw materials instead of producing the batteries themselves. We have about 200,000 square kilometres of land in Australia that has a propensity to produce hydrogen for the future. And hydrogen is a very clean thing to burn. It just produces water for the future. We could take that, and if we could figure out how to do that cost effectively, we could bring back steel production and things like aluminium production and so forth. We have a lot of we produce CO2 from a lot of the processes that we have in the country. For example, from our oil and gas reservoirs, or potentially as a side product from industrial processes such as the making fertilizers or even hydrogen. And we could capture that and we could turn it into carbon nanoparticles, which we could use to produce composites, which is a replacement for steel, which is potentially lighter and stronger. We could produce chemicals and fuels such as synthetic diesel or synthetic jet fuel or methanol. We could produce bioplastics. There's plenty of things we could do, right? So
why isn't all of this happening? Why aren't companies getting into actually making things rather than just exporting the raw materials?
I just think that for a start, we've got to have very, very high wages. We've got the highest casual wages actually in the world, which does make it hard to run certain businesses. And we're actually caught between the pincers of, on one side, taxation. If you look at a percentage of GDP going to various factors, you've got one side, taxation is increasing at a large extent, and the other is land costs. the government is in response to the mining boom.
Too expensive to do business here, basically.
That's right. I mean, the government in response to the mining boom ending decided to blow a housing bubble. And this housing bubble is a bubble like no other. It's resulted in housing in Ballarat being more expensive on a relative basis than New York, and Tamworth more expensive than Tokyo.
Unbelievable.
It's resulted in Australians becoming this...
Well, let's look at the economy. Interest rates are at emergency lows, record lows, and there's still concerns from the RBA and the IMF that we should be doing more, that the government should be giving some sort of extra stimulus to help stimulate the economy and to help encourage growth. Do you think this is needed?
I think we need to do something in the country, but the crazy discussions that are happening right now. I'm going to actually a dinner that Philip Lowe from the Reserve Bank is speaking on Tuesday. The IMF has now publicly come out and said that when recessions actually happen, central banks typically respond by cutting policy rates by 300 basis points to 600 basis points, 3 to 6%. Because globally around the world, central banks are pretty much at zero or negative, they're saying that actually we believe the zero lower bound or the 0% bound is actually now the effective lower bound, which means you can go negative. And they're actually talking about quite openly cutting rates to negative 4%, right? Can you imagine a world where you go to the bank and you put money in there as a saver and you come back at the end of the year and you've lost 4%, right?
So do you think the government needs to embrace a more aggressive fiscal strategy so that the Reserve Bank doesn't have to do this?
It should. We need to terraform the economy like Israel did, right? We need to get in the national agenda discussion about innovation and actually build world-leading companies and produce world-leading industries, which will future-proof the economy for the future.
It's going to take a long time, though.
It's a multi-decade thing, but there's things we can do which actually happen very rapidly in the relative scheme of things. One thing we could do, for example, is fix the educational system, right? So despite this boom happening in education, it's really at the expense of domestic students that we're educating international students. And where we're educating people, and even though we spend a fair bit of money on education relative to other countries of the world.
So you're speaking about tertiary education, of course.
Secondary education and tertiary education. Every young kid would love to work on self-driving cars, augmented reality, build the next Facebook, SpaceX, all sorts of things to do with technology.
But we're not equipping them with those skills.
Correct. They can't connect the dots between what they're told in school and a career. And so if you look at enrolments in information technology, from 2002 to 2015, which is the last report by the deans of science in the country, enrolments in IT is actually down 35%. Enrolments in electrical engineering is down 53%.
Because people aren't interested in it, or they're not.
Kids can't connect the dots. Yeah, kids can't connect the dots between what they see in the world and a career path. We've got this educational system which is training people for the 18th century, where you've got this leaderboard that says the best job is basically become a doctor or become a lawyer. Now,
and that's what kids still aim to be.
That's right, and the parents and the teachers and what have you encourage them to do this. Last time I looked at the numbers, we actually couldn't find enough residencies for everyone to complete their medical degree. And God knows we don't need more lawyers in the country, right? So
that's for sure. Now, I mean, you're in a very unique position at freelancer.com because you have how many? 40,000 or something?
40 million.
40 million.
Close to 40 million.
Around the world, people on your books. That's huge.
Correct.
What are the jobs of the future? What would you be recommending that, I don't even know if you have kids, but do you have kids?
Not that I know of.
No kids, okay. Well, if you had kids, what would you be recommending that they study to be able to have a successful long-term career?
Well, I think you have to keep reinventing yourself. So, it's not just go to university and get one degree and that's it. You've got to continually continue education and so forth. It's all about, skills that are in high demand, that are sophisticated, that require critical reasoning and thinking. So things like engineering, things like machine learning. Would you believe in it? Despite this machine learning, artificial intelligence boom that everyone's talking about around the world, we've actually had a drop of enrolments in artificial intelligence around 20 to 30% in the last 15 years.
Where? In
Australia.
I didn't even know we had an artificial intelligence degree.
You can do it as a stream in some universities.
Okay.
And in the country, you only produce 146 PhDs in computer science per annum across all disciplines of computer science.
So Australian kids are really not being trained to have at least the high-paying and advanced jobs of the future.
Correct. When I went through high school, I was not told the word engineering once, and I thought it had something to do with driving trains.
So even the school curriculum really needs to change.
That's right. We're teaching people French and German and Latin and Greek and so forth, and really equipping them for a world that doesn't exist anymore.
Now, you've been friends with Malcolm Turnbull for a long time, and he's going to be at your conference next week. You're going to be interviewing him. How do you think he went as Prime Minister?
I think he was probably one of the most technology-focused prime ministers we've had. I think that he didn't get enough of a run to actually do what I think he really wanted to do, and he had his hands tied because he did, certain deals to kind of get into power, which I thought he could get. I think he thought he could get the shackles off when he called the double dissolution, and unfortunately, that went the wrong direction. So I think he's probably about as good a politician as we would ever get to be prime minister, and it's unfortunate he probably couldn't actually execute the agenda that I think everyone was expecting him to execute, and not just that, also on social policy and so forth. So next week I actually run Australia's biggest technology and startup and growth conference. It's called StartCon. It's on November 22nd and 23rd at startcon.com. And it's like the Lollapalooza of technology. We've got about 60 speakers. We've brought out 20 or 30 internationally from around the world, from Silicon Valley. We've got like a kids coding camp. We've got self-driving cars, robotics, augmented reality. And I've got Turnbull on stage Friday morning at 9:30, where I'm going to talk to him.
Ask him any hard questions?
I am. They always say when politicians stop being in power, they actually tell you what they really think, and I'm going to ask him how he can get innovation back on the agenda. Well,
he dropped it from the agenda completely when it didn't work for the 2016 election. How do you think Scott Morrison's going at the moment in terms of handling the economy?
My thoughts and prayers are with Scott Morrison.
How do you think he's doing?
I don't think he's doing anything. I think he's avoiding discussing anything to do with the economy. The economy is absolutely cactus in this country. I mean, we've basically blown the housing bubble like no other as a bridge to somewhere, which is turning out to be a bridge to nowhere. It's led to Australians being the second most indebted in the world on a household income to GDP basis, the second highest principal and interest repayments in the world. And if you look at household prices to income, they're at 191.1 as of last month, which is higher than the UK, the US and Spain before their housing crashes. So you can either believe in magic or you can believe in maths, and according to maths, house prices are going to drop between 40 and 50% in this country from the peak.
Over what period?
Over the next couple of years, right? I mean, there's a bunch of things the government can do to kind of keep propping the market up, and they've been doing that with, cutting rates and first homeowners bonuses and so forth. And these things can take longer than you can expect. I mean, already in 2007, 2008, Australians were more in debt than the Americans were to housing, and we've blown a bubble for a decade since then. So these things can take a long way to actually unwind, but I think that the turning point is happening now. 32% of all mortgages in Australia are currently stressed, right?
I would be interested, you said you're going to a dinner with Philip Lowe, the RBA governor, on Tuesday night, because some of his recent comments have indicated that our economy is likely to return to trend growth next year, and that it's not as dismal as some people. And he is still, of course, calling for more stimulus, but it's not as dismal as required. And so Scott Morrison and Josh Frydenberg, the strategy at the moment has been, not to flow the economy with more stimulus until it's urgently needed.
Well, Philip Lowe's plan is to smash the 10-year bond to 0%, to start basically buying up, counterfeiting money basically to buy up dodgy mortgages, to lower interest rates and provide stimulus to the housing market, which is already one of the most overpriced housing markets in the world. Use the money that's basically counterfeited through quantitative easing to basically buy stocks. And it's not a very good plan. And the point of doing all this is you increase the money supply and make everyone basically poorer to try and provide some stimulus. If you want the economy to actually have some stimulus, we should be creating companies and creating industries, not forcing savers to spend their money because the interest rates are so low that they decide to take the money out of the bank and buy something with it.
Just on a completely another topic, one of the people you're interviewing at your conference next week, or you've got speaking, is John McAfee, who's one of the world's most wanted men. And no one even knows where he is. He doesn't even have a phone. How did you even get hold of him? And can you tell us a little bit about his story? We only have a minute left, so we don't have a lot of time.
He's fascinating. He started McAfee Antivirus, which he then sold many years ago. And now he's a famed, libertarian / cryptocurrency.
He's running for president.
He's running for president on the libertarian ticket. Yeah. He ran in 2016. He's running in 2020. He's a very interesting character. He produces videos, more videos on Twitter than just about anyone, and he'll be live streaming into the conference where I'm going to interview him on technology.
Where is he?
We don't know. I don't want to know. I didn't want to ask. I just said, can you stream? And he agreed to do so. So,
do you think he's paranoid, or are people really after him?
Well, yeah, who knows? There's certainly people after him. Certainly, I think the IRS and the SEC and so forth, a bunch of people are after him. So, but he's extremely interesting, and he's also quite intelligent, and I'm really looking forward to what he has to say. And we'll be interviewed on Saturday morning at the conference.
Saturday morning. And just to explain that again, why is he on the run? Why is he a wanted man?
I believe because he hasn't paid his tax for a long time in the US is the official reason. Who knows? He's probably going to run for many different agencies from many different governments around the world. So.
A bit tricky to run for president, wouldn't it, if you're in hiding, not showing up
well,
anywhere?
his billboards actually say, don't vote for John McAfee 2020, because he knows he doesn't have a chance of getting in. But at least he's using it as a platform to discuss what he wants to discuss. So.
Yeah. All right. I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much for that. Just a final word, so that if there's parents watching, the key things that their kids should study: engineering.
I think engineering. I think computer science. I think all forms of the sciences. There are also subjects like design and so forth, where user experience and so forth, which are critically in need. It's all about creating products and services for the future, and so by very nature, it's technology driven. Education shouldn't finish just after you've done your bachelor's. You should continue to do continuing professional education and other things like that.
Seems like the jobs of the future are really catered for people who have a mathematically focused brains. I mean, what about for all of us who...
No, also creative focus as well. I mean, the difference between something like an Airbnb, I mean, the concept of Airbnb has been around for a long time, rentals online and so forth. But the thing that really made it shine was a great user experience and great design, right? And there's plenty of companies out there. For example, even in Australia, Envato, one of Australia's great private companies, what makes them, I think, the secret to their success is phenomenal design.
Yeah.
Right? So there's plenty of jobs out there, not just the mathematical ones.